Good morning. Time now 9 a.m. On the Wednesday, August 28th, in Japan Standard Time. Welcome to another edition of the World Bank Tokyo Online Morning Seminar. My name is Koichi Omori. I am Senior External Affairs Officer of the World Bank based in Tokyo. We organize these online morning seminars to introduce the latest publications, latest programs, activities by the World Bank. This morning, we have a pleasure of featuring the Jorge Rodriguez Meza, who is the program manager in the Enterprise Analysis Unit in the Development Economics Vice Presidency, which is a research arm of the World Bank. The reason why we are featuring the Enterprise Survey today is two reasons. There are two reasons. First, we certainly wanted to shed the light and introduce the Enterprise Survey itself, which has actually nearly 20-year the life within the World Bank. And I understand many of the Japanese academics and researchers and stakeholders are actually taking advantage of the Enterprise Survey itself. But we didn't have an opportunity in the past to really introduce the team and introduce the survey itself in a formal manner. So we wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to introduce the Enterprise Survey to the audience in Japan. But also, the second reason is that we are currently running a Japanese national recruitment drive. The nearly 20, actually 19 positions from the World Bank and IFC are being advertised on the World Bank Tokyo office website at this moment. And one of the positions that are included in the positions posted currently is the economist position in the Enterprise Analysis Unit. And Jorge is actually the manager of the unit, so that for those of you who are considering to apply for this particular position, economist position in Enterprise Analysis Unit, our speaker today, Jorge, is your hiring manager. So it will be a great opportunity for you to listen to Jorge in terms of what the unit is doing, and what other Enterprise Survey itself, so that you can think further and then get ready for your application. And hopefully, at the end of the seminar, you'll be fully persuaded and encouraged to literally push the button to apply for the position. We'll listen to Jorge for perhaps 30 minutes or so following the presentation, which has been already posted on the announcement page of the seminar. And after the presentation, I'll read the questions that we received already from some of you. If you did not have opportunities in advance to send your question, please do so by using the online form posted on the announcement page of the seminar. Or you can simply post your question on the chat section of the YouTube screen. I'll keep my eyes on them, and then I'll read your question during the Q&A session on your behalf, asking Jorge to respond. So with this a little bit of a long introduction today, I would like to now formally invite Jorge Rodriguez Meza, who is the Enterprise Analysis Unit Manager in the World Bank. Jorge, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Koichi, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to present for this audience. As Koichi said, it is a pleasure because I like to introduce the product that we produce, and actually I'm going to be going over that product, but much more than that. I'm going to be talking about what my unit does. And I want to do that because as Koichi explained, I have a vested interest because I have a position, and I know some of you may be applying. So I'll be using this presentation to also explain all the scope or the broad scope of the activities of the unit, so that you potential candidates have a sense of the kind of things that we do and the things that will be expected from the candidates, for the candidate that would be hired. Okay. But it's certainly true that the main thing that we produce in my unit is the enterprise service. And so let me just give you an example. I'm going to use these first slides are built from a presentation that we use around the world as we present the enterprise service. And as you can see, I start by saying I'm going to talk about the enterprise service, the World Bank, in the business ready report, something that Koichi didn't mention, which is very important. I'm going to say it from the beginning, because this unit in the enterprise service in the last couple of years have become even more important on how they've been during the last 20 years for the World Bank, because in addition to all the uses they always had, they're going to provide data for this new report which is called the Business Ready Report. For those of you who follow the bank, should know by now that the Business Ready is the substitute of the Doing Business report that was discontinued about 4 years ago. And this is the new report that is awaited with much anxiety around the world. I know everybody is looking forward to the first publication that is going to happen in the first week of October for the first round of countries. I'll explain this in my presentation. But more importantly for all of you, since you are joining us in the enterprise service and this presentation, is that this product that we produce is now an input into that report. And so as you will see, this explains the expansion of our work program. I also want to explain a little bit of how we use the data. I want to enter into a little bit of the technicalities of the sampling. And the reason why I'm going to do that is not because I want to confuse you or be super technical. I know that's not my interest, but I do want to convey the level of technicality that we will, and that whoever wants to join my unit will have to be prepared to deal with. But as I will explain, there's always, for those of you who will be interested, don't worry too much about it, because there's a process of learning in my unit. Everybody comes in, it's very unique what we do. And then there will be a process of learning. So you don't have, I don't expect that all of you who intend to apply will know all this, but I just want to share with you the technical background of the service. And in a little bit on the implementation, finally, I want to explain, because yes, whoever applies and whoever has hired would be mostly in charge of projects of implementation. And the interesting thing that you may have seen in my presentation is I'm going to use the example of Japan, because we are going to do the enterprise survey. We are starting the process of the Japan enterprise survey right now. Okay, so let me just start very briefly. This is something I tend to do, as I explained to all of you. One of the roles that the person who joined us and that my unit does is implementing this enterprise service around the world. And so these slides that I'm going to be using here at the very beginning are the slides that we actually use in every single country when we go and train the teams that are going to do the data collection for us. So this is exactly the kind of the task that whoever joins my unit is expected to do systematically. So we will explain, for example, it's important that the World Bank is a membership organization, which is something that for some of you who are familiar with the bank, this may be already known knowledge, but not everybody is aware of this. That they think sometimes, and we know that as we go around the world, that the World Bank is an institution that is in the US, and in that it's concerned with development, but they don't seem to understand that almost every member, one of the 189 members of the country, is a shareholder of the bank. Okay, Japan, as many other countries, are shareholders of the bank, and the bank is also a development bank that, in a sense, that is the mission, as you guys know, is basically to favor the growth and development and reduction of poverty around the world, but also for high-income economies. That's the case of Japan and many other economies like that, is to favor the economic development of all the economies in the growth of the private sector in a specific. That, as you can see, this is a slide and a second bullet point. I have it highlighted because the World Bank has many areas of operation, and you may be familiar with many of these areas, in poverty, in health, education, environment, and so forth. But what my unit does, and what the enterprise service is concerned about, is mostly what we would call private sector development. And the enterprise service, and that's what explains their existence, is always been, for many, many years now at the bank, probably one of the key, maybe the key diagnostic, the most systematically produced over time diagnostic of the private sector that the bank produces, and it produces internally. We produce it ourselves, but we produce it by interviewing firms around the world. Is the main diagnostic, because it's what it has informed our colleagues in operations, and Koichi already explained that myself and my unit sits within the World Bank in the research department. That means that we do not engage in operations. We don't do any of the lending or the operations that the World Bank does. As you all know, we lend all over the world and have many operations. Most of these operations are informed with the data that we produce, at least in the area of private sector development. And that is the origin of the enterprise service 20 years ago. To be more specific, since the very beginning, the enterprise service have two objectives that you see here in the two slides, in the two first bullet points, and there's a third objective that was added in the last 2 years, as I explained earlier. From the beginning, the enterprise service were created to understand, to get a description of or an understanding of the business environment in a country that is faced, that the private sector faces. It is, this measurement is done in a way, and you can see that we highlight here the word comparable. It has to be done in a way that the metrics, the indicators that are generated with the data are comparable across the world. The idea being that the diagnostic itself can be used as a benchmark to identify in which areas each economy is doing well, or in which areas is doing poorly. And the idea is to generate reform. And this, since 2005, when enterprise services were started to do this, using this global methodology, have been done with this objective. Also, one thing that is very important is that we not only develop this description of the business environment, which, as you know, the business environment is everything that is around a firm and conditions its decisions, but we also, in addition to that, we also collect some basic financial information, or what we would call outcomes at the firm level, which allow us to measure not only the business environment, but also what is the impact or the effect of this business environment on different outcomes at the firm level, and things such as productivity, employment growth, innovation, and so forth. So the idea is that the diagnostic is not only a diagnostic of the conditions, but also collects information that try to allow us to evaluate how these conditions affect the operations of the private sector. This is one of the reasons why this product over the many years has been so useful for many researchers around the world. And as you, I'm going to mention this in a few slides, but we provide access to the data, and that explains that there's more than 800 peer-reviewed papers that have been published with this data. And these are the traditional uses of the World Bank that for about 18 to 15 years, the enterprise service were doing for many years. As I explained at the beginning of my presentation, about 2 or 3 years ago, when the doing business discontinued and the World Bank decides that it has to create or generate a new report that improves and is much better than the original doing business, but also has the same idea of benchmarking again the business environment from the perspective of the regulation. And so they decided, the bank in the inception of this business ready, there was one of the main enhancements that was decided is what was to address one of the main critiques that doing business report had. If you, for those of you who have been followed these discussions over the years, one of the many main critiques of the doing business was that they did not consult with the private sector. It was an assessment that was created and computed on the basis of purely conversations with experts, and that was a major critique. So in the new project, the new business ready, this critique is addressed by incorporating data from actual firms. And obviously, since the World Bank has been invested for so many years on the enterprise service, that explains that all that dimensions of how the private firm lives or experience the private sector is going to be taken from the data we produce for the enterprise service. So in a sense, the enterprise service is part of the business ready in that sense, because many of the indicators we compute were going to be used by them. And also, we added quite a few questions to the questionnaire, to the standard global questionnaire that we apply around the world to address some of the topics that we were not covering before. Okay? And so, if you think about it, you go and see the historical evidence, our data, you will find that we have many developing economies, more of the poorer economies we have lived over the years several times. But what I have here, I want to show you is what is our coverage in this year and the next 3 years. This year, we published 50 economies, 50, actually, no, it was at the beginning 54. There was some that were moved to the second rollout, but we published already these 54 economies, or 50. In the second rollout, we're going to add 62 economies. And as you can see, this adds very large economies like China, the US, Canada, and Brazil. And in the third report, in the third year, we're going to add all the rest of the world. As you can see, Japan is here in the dark blue. As you can see how Japan is added in the third report. And that explains what I was saying, what I said at the beginning, that I was going to be using the example of Japan to explain how we do the enterprise service, because I assume for the audience, for all of you, is more relevant. As you can see, the idea is that the whole world will be covered during these 3 rotations. As you can see, the light blue, the lighter blue here is the first round. Those countries are completed and published right now. We just published them. The intermediate blue, like the US and Canada, is the one that are already in the field right now in data collection. And the dark blue are the countries in which we are starting the process right now. And as you can see, after 3 years, we complete the whole world, and then we will continue every 3 years like that. As you can see, the idea is covering all the world. Obvious cases here is a few countries in gray, as like Russia, in Venezuela. I don't know if you're familiar with the geography. Some are countries in which we would like to do the enterprise survey as well, but given the political circumstances at this very moment, it looks like we will not be able to do it. But they will be incorporated while the solution improve, the situation improves in these economies. So just to summarize, in the enterprise service, to repeat an idea that I said, the enterprise service continues being a very basic, an important diagnostic of the private sector that the World Bank produces. And now it turns out to be a diagnostic that is going to be available for all the countries, not only developing economies, thanks to the contribution or the participation in the business ready report. So let me just go to a different point I wanted to say. One very important point for us, the enterprise service is produced by the bank. It's one of the few data sets I know around the world that is produced under this principle of the public good of information. The idea is that we produce the data, we generate the data, and we publish it the minute it's finished, and everybody around the world, including my colleagues at the World Bank, including my own team members, have access to the data at the same time. At the same time, we believe in equal access and free competition, even in research, in the sense that we put the data out there for everybody to produce the best work they can actually do. And so this is the idea. We produce the data and give access to everybody. The data is available for researchers, properly anonymized, of course, because we do protect the identity of the respondents, the firms, and the individuals who answer the service. Does not reveal to absolutely anybody. We protect that, but the data itself is important for us that is published, and is published in our website, which here you see a snapshot of the website. In the website, you will find indicators, which basically that we compute are very basic indicators. They're averages of questions in our questionnaire. This is an example, just to see the first column is percentage of firms experiencing electrical outages. This is just one question that you find in the questionnaire. Do you experience power outages? Yes. If you say answer yes, then we ask them how many power outages you experience. As you can see, the number is the second column, number of electrical outages in a typical month. So this is the idea. This is the indicator that we compute. In fact, this indicator that you see here are some of the indicators that the business ready is using in their scoring for all the different dimensions. In the website, once we complete every country, we create a country page. And so in here, I just use the China example because I just wanted to highlight, because we haven't done Japan yet. As I said, Japan, we're going to do it for the first time now. As I explained, because for the first time, we are doing high-income economies. China, we have done it in the past. And as you can see, I wanted to use this country page of China in our website to highlight the fact that the survey, as you can see, this is the description of the sample by sector, by size, and by location within China. The idea is that these samples are drawn in a sense that in a way that is representative of the whole private sector, of the whole economy. That means that it covers all the sectors, all the firm sizes, and all the different locations. I'll explain a little bit more in detail because this is very important for us in terms of the technical side of the generation of the data. So this is how the data is published. This is the website. In the website, there's also a tab as that you see at the very top on the bottom, in the top right, you see firm level data sets. That when you click in this firm level data sets, or I think it's explore the data, I think it's changed the name now in the website, you gain access to a portal in which you find the databases of the answers by all the firms. Again, as I said, properly anonymized. And that's what is very useful for researchers. We know for policymakers and for the public in general, for investors, this website and the slides that I present earlier in terms of presenting indicators that are comparable across economies is what is much more useful for them. But the data sets themselves I'll explain a little bit more on how we prepare the data sets, are extremely important for the more technical audience, which I assume some of you will be here. And I wanted to offer and remind everybody that is joining us that this data is there for you to use. That's the idea of the public good of information. Of course, let me just finish. The data is also used by us and by many people within the World Bank to produce many reports. But we separate the reports from the data. And so here I'm just listing a few of the things of the reports that are produced, that have been produced by us and by many others, because this is a separate thing. Our mandate, in a sense, within my unit at the World Bank is producing the data. On top of that, we also produce research. That is something that you will see in the profile of the position I posted for economists, because that's the reason why I hire economists, because we not only want to be data producers, but we also want to do data users and use our own data to produce research. And then here I'm just showing a little bit of the research products. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of examples on the type of research that we're discussing here. Before I continue, I do want to be a bit more specific on the business ready, because I know there's a great interest, and I assume there may be some of you who are very interested on the business ready, and to digging a little bit deeper on this business ready. So the business ready is similar to the doing business, as I said earlier. Is an assessment of the business environment that is going to focus on three pillars. The regulatory side, this is very similar to the all doing business. But there are two pillars that are relatively new, which is the provision of services by the state or by the governments for the private sector. And the third one is the efficiency in which these services are provided to the private sector. That third pillar is what is going to be taken from the enterprise service, because the efficiency is going to be measured by asking a representative sample of firms, which is what the enterprise service does. Okay. And so these three pillars are going to be measuring all these 10 topics that you see here in the slide, and that cover the lifeline of a firm in a typical economy, from business entry to business insolvency or business closure at the end. As I said, this is what I said earlier. There are three pillars for each one of those dimensions: the regulatory framework, the provision of public services, and the services, and the efficiency, how these public services are provided. And that is what is going to be coming from the enterprise service. Not uniquely, some of the dimensions will also be taken from expert consultation, but this third element is mostly taken from our product. Okay. Let me just very briefly here. I'm gonna have a few technical slides. I'm gonna go relatively quickly, because this is what I was saying earlier. I would want you to get a sense of the seriousness and the rigorous nature of how we do this enterprise service, because we are very rigorous from a statistical perspective on how these samples and how the data collection happens. First of all, we need to implement a global methodology that has been decided and vetted by experts for many years now. And in this global methodology, we're going to select a sample that is representative of the non-agricultural, non-extractive, formal private sector of 5 employees and more. And you can see that here I'm being more explicit, more on what we would call in statistics the universe of inferences of the study. The idea, again, is that the comparability of the indicators of the enterprise survey around the world is guaranteed by the fact that the coverage is the same. Of course, economies may be different around the world. In some services may be more important than manufacturing and so forth, and that will be reflected in the sample. But the coverage, in terms of the coverage of the sectors that are included, must be the same, so that we are comparing apples with apples. That's what guarantees the comparability. Also, that all the services are implemented in the same manner. The data is collected by us using private firms in every economy. We do not work with statistical offices around the world. This is usually the World Bank work with governments. But in this instance, in this specific diagnostic, is being paramount of our methodology that we work with private businesses, because the idea is that that's what guarantees the independence and completely lack of influence that could be, or biases that could be introduced in certain economies, if the respondents think or take the data collector as part of the government. So that's why it's always been that very basic principle that we select competitively a local, very marketing firm, well-established, who actually do the data collection or us. And this is important for me, as I wanted to highlight here, because whoever applies for the job in my unit, one of the main tasks you will have, it will be to actually manage these relationships with these vendors. It's basically managing project with vendors, and so with all that what that entails. And of course, the sampling methodology is the same around the world. I'm going to explain in every economy. We use a stratified random sampling, and we do it on the basis of the complete and official list of firms registered to operate in every economy. It's a survey of establishment non-firms, but I don't want to go into that technical side. If anybody wants a question on that, I can expand. We do a stratified random sampling because we want to be representative at the national level, but, and let me just introduce here a little bit of complexity in the product, is that the surveys are also representative within country at the level of different regions, at the level of different sectors, at the level of different type of firms. And so that is another way of saying that the surveys are stratified by 3 levels of stratification: size of the firm, sector of activity, and location within country. Of course, the degree disaggregation in how this is, which are these groups, if you will, varies by country. And I will explain this again. I will use the example for Japan to give you an example of what they will do. This is a little bit of technical terms that I'm going to skip here because for the sake of brevity, because I see it already. It is important that you understand that what we will do is, this concept, just to take, for example, this concept of the sampling frame, and probably is better explained with this graph, this just here. Basically, if you see the universe is, in the statistics we call is the universe of, or the population that we're going to estimate is the private sector in here. But what happens in reality, and this is a very technical way of explaining what we do, in many economies, what we will have is a sampling frame, which is ideally the sampling frame and the universe is the same, but the reality around the world is that is not always the case. It's actually, I would say, it's rarely the case, because we don't have access to the full universe. And so what we get is a sampling frame, which has to be fairly complete, but is inaccurate. And as you can see from the sampling frame, we extract the sample. Unfortunately, what is also very common is the sampling frame is more this graph that you see here, includes ineligibles. And so what am I making on this point? Because in this presentation, because again, whoever join us, all those are the technical things that we need to deal. We need to, in every economy we want to do, the person who joins us and want to run a project has to be clear, that has a very clear description of what the universe is in each economy. Example, in Japan, what is the number of firms, what is the establishments by all the different sectors, all the different regions in sizes, a tabulation, official, that's what we are going to project, and then obtain a sampling, the sampling frame from which we can draw the sample. And the sampling frame must have a series of conditions that is important. In particular, it must contain information on all the different dimensions of stratification. This person is going to draw the sample, and it's going to be give the sample to, and we have the expertise of doing that. And then it's going to give the sample to the vendor who has been selected to implement the data collection. All that is done in-house. We do that. And then the vendor in each economy is just the vendor or contractor is just going to do the data collection for us. But one of the tasks that the person will join in my unit, one of the very, very important tasks, is that the person is responsible for each project and is responsible to deliver the data at the end, is responsible for the management of the sample. And there's a whole protocol of management procedures on how this is done that I don't have time to explain here. It's fairly technical, but that gives you a sense of the kind of activities that if you join a unit, you will be doing. As I said, every sample it will be stratified by sector of activity, firm size, and region within country. This slide basically explains what's the coverage of the service around the world. And so just to make an example, because to just very briefly, this is the classification of every economy according to the United Nations actually has this classification. And what we include is what is in green. And so in every economy, the coverage must be the same. Again, the responsibility of whoever joins the unit, it runs every different project in a different country, must make sure that in that country we have a full listing of covering all these sectors that you see here in green. a task, let me tell you, not as simple as it sounds. But it is part of the things. And so then we have to stratify. In sector, we stratify. There's a methodology. We want to stratify by manufacturing and services, but for a country like Japan, which is pretty large and very large economy, we will be stratify even farther than that. And so within manufacturing, we will select sectors at the 2-digit level, and those are selected according to the contribution to value added, contribution to employment, and contribution to the number of establishments. Similar within services, we also stratify within sector. And again, not to scare you, but whoever runs the project, it will have to work on this with me and with the rest of the team. But the responsibility of the person is making sure that this design of the sample is done properly according to the methodology, internal methodology that we have. We divide the size, the stratify by size between the small, medium, and large, and all of you understand that it's very important that we have that we can actually have enough observations of the different size of firms, because we know from economics that is the nature of the many of the things that we care in private sector development is very different for large firms vis-a-vis SMEs. It turns out that for very large economies, as is the case of Japan, we even added as extra level of certificates that is called the very large, which is the top 1%. And we did that because for those of you who follow the literature around size in private sector, we know that the very large firms in very large economies are extremely important, because they are main employers, but also main determinants of many of the things that we care about, like productivity, innovation, and so forth. So we wanted to stratify by that, so that we make sure they have enough very large firms as well, defining at the top 1% of the firms by size. Just to give you a sense what this means in terms of Japan, the regions in which we intend to distribute the country, you see here, this is something that we're already working on. And so in a sense, to repeat what I was saying, what we're going to do, the sample for Japan is going to be, we're going to have a sample that is representative of the private sector in Japan, but also that you can do the same indicators and get significance at this regional level. And we intend to do obtain enough observations in each one of these regions, and this is part of the design of the sample, so that they also get representatives by these regions. And this is, as you can see, I'm not familiar with Japan, but we use local knowledge to actually group the country in these regions that I understand makes sense. For you will understand no better than me on this. Let me just skip this because it's very technical. I just wanted to say that in the end, you probably don't see this very well, but let me just very briefly, because this is a very large matrix, what it's also that we have to work on. And so basically we will distribute the sample. As you can see on the very left column is the regions, then each region is divided into a small, medium, large, and very large. And the columns are the different sectors. And so basically what we are going to do is distribute the sample across all these different dimensions, establishing targets for one of those cells, each one of those cells. In cells is the combination of sector, size, and region. And that basically give you a parameter of how you distribute the sample and how you start the field work with the local vendor. Okay, this in terms of the how we define the service, the technical side. As I said, I'm being very brief here. It's much more technical than this, but not to worry. For whoever join us, we will train you as well on this, on the technical side of this. Just one thing that is very important. I want to use this example in the overall sample size that we're going to do in Japan, as you can see in this example, because Japan is a very large economy. This is the sample sizes of all the different economies around the world. Was defined according to a budget envelope. We have a budget, so we need to make sure that we can cover the whole world. And in the case of the Japan, we want to the target total sample is 2,160 firms. The idea is that at the end of the sample, we expect to have 2,160 establishments, by the way. As you can see, depending on the size economy, the sample sizes of the overall sample are smaller. As you can imagine, a very small economy, think Vanuatu or some of the Pacific Islands, the sample size is 150. And believe me, 150 is already almost covering almost the whole private sector once you say 5 employees or more. Then the distribution of the sample for a country like Japan, when we want to say, well, we have 2,160 samples, but we're going to distribute it across all these regions and sectors and sizes. And how do we do that? So that is a somewhat complicated process. These slides explain how we do it. I don't want to go into detail because this is I see that it's already time. I just wanted to highlight this graph, which is basically we take the advantage that most of our indicators are proportions, and proportions have a bounded variance, and so the optimal sample size for a given level of precision is 120. And so I just want to mention this briefly. This is what this graph is showing. And so we use the 120 per level of stratification for to design the sample for each country. And so I'm going to skip very quickly on this slide just to show you pretty much how we do that. The idea is basically distribute this. I'm using the example of the sample design for South Africa. The idea, again, because this is a smaller, and this I realized one in the past, and so it helped me explain briefly the idea. So we divide South Africa into these 4 regions on the left, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and all this. And so then the size, as you can see, similar to the table that you saw for Japan, but now smaller because it's a smaller economy. And then the sectors, as you can see, the subsectors in manufacturing that for South Africa, we decided these reflect the characteristics of South Africa: food, textile and garments, fabricated metal products, and motor vehicles. The rest of manufacturing subsuming residual, which is all the manufacturing, and similar with services. So the idea is distributing the sample, in this case for South Africa, that you can see at the bottom right, is the total sample is 1,050, distributed between all these regions, sizes, and sectors in such a way that we get that target. And also at the same time, along the whole column and along the whole lines, you get enough observations by region, by sector, and by size, as you can see at the bottom, that guarantees that level of precision that we want to know, that we need at least 120 for each one of those. I realize this is a little bit dense for the technical, but for those of you who are familiar, I wanted to tell you that just to share a little bit, because this is give you a sense, as I repeat, of what is our job in here of making sure. I know the user doesn't care too much about it. In the end, the user, what we're going to care, oh, I can divide the data by all these different dimensions, which is great. Our responsibility is making sure that this is done properly from a statistical standpoint. Okay, let me just briefly, very quickly go to the implementation. I wanted to highlight this slide because one of my team members this afternoon told me that I sent the presentation I sent you guys yesterday had a mistake on the dates. So this is for Japan, the timeline that we have, and I guess for all of you will be interesting. We are in the process of bidding the vendor right now. We expect by October of this month, of this year, we will have a vendor. This vendor will be selected competitively. We will do the contracting and negotiation and prepare all the logistical preparation, which now I hope some of you understand how much work goes into that logistical preparation to prepare those samples. We expect to be ready by December 2024, and we will be training, and that's another thing we do. We do train the local teams in person, and so we will come to Japan. Some of my team members, I don't know if I'll be able, I would love to, but I cannot be anywhere, but we will do a training of the local vendor. We spend up to a week with the local vendor, full days, training them on all the details, on the questionnaire, on this managed sample, and so forth. And once it's that, we let the vendor go and do the data collection. Without enough time to do the data collection, we expect that between January 2025 all the way to up to January 2026, there will be a year, more or less, to collect this data. This is another important point. These enterprise services take a long time to produce because we depend on the willingness of the private sector to answer service, and the private sector is a very difficult sector to survey. And then, as I said, if we go all the way to 2026, you expect that the data will be published by 2026. Again, as I said earlier, for everybody to use, us at the World Bank, but everybody in Japan and everybody that will be interested in this data. That gives you a little bit of the timeline. Of course, I didn't explain just much on the data collection. Let me just say that the data is collected into stages. Most of this, when the sample is received, we do a screening of all the samples and we recruit the firms, we do appointments, and then there's an actual interview, which is the actual data collection. That seems to be that simple, but as you can see, what is behind is much more complicated. These interviews happen most in face-to-face, not necessarily in person. I mean, like what we are doing right now, virtual interviews. Because they are very long, they are long questionnaires, and then they are done in a way, and there's another topic of discussion on itself, on how to maximize the participation rates in the survey, and also the item response rate, how to maximize they respond all the questions with the questionnaire without affecting the quality of the information. And so that is, as I said, is another topic of discussion within my unit, and it's something that you will learn, but I just wanted to mention it here because we don't have much time to go into those details. Let me just, because I see that I'm already at 40 minutes, I just want to very briefly, I don't want to stop here because the unit that I manage, and if any of you join us, we do much more than just the enterprise service. We also have other service, and let me just use that slide to explain this. The enterprise service, as you saw earlier, covers the private sector of 5 employees plus and registered firms. But around the world, there's registered firms with less than 4 or 5 employees. That's what we call microservice. And we do some of those in some economies. And perhaps not in Japan, in the high-income economies, this is not as important, but in many developing economies, this third component, the informal service, completes the picture of the private sector, which is the unregistered businesses of any size, the firms that operate at the margin of the law. In those, we now know that in low-income economies, but even in middle-income economies, like if we talk about Latin America, for example, or in South Asia, this is still very important component, informal businesses. And so we do have products similar to the enterprise service that are being tailored for these micro and informal businesses. Since I don't have much time, it's a very interesting topic for those of you who are interested in these issues of data collection. Let me just say that in terms of the informal objectives, the objectives are the same, but what we are interested from a research perspective is this last bullet point, and this is something that is this phenomenon that we observe around the world, that the informal sector is pervasive. No matter how much efforts have been done to reduce regulations, to facilitate registration, it still persists. And large segments of the population around the world, particularly the poorest people, tend to work and make a living in this sector. And so one of the objectives of this parallel product that we have in my unit is to quantify or to evaluate the costs and benefits of formalization. Or another way of putting it, why is that they remain in the informal sector? Why don't they formalize? What are the obstacles for formalization? Okay. I don't have, there's a very interesting, for those of you who are interested on this topic, I just wanted to show you, because one of the characteristics of the informal business is that they are unregistered. And so therefore there is, to put it in the context of what I was saying earlier, there's no sampling frame by definition because they are not registered. So how do you survey firms that you don't even know whether they exist? And so we have developed a very interesting methodology. And I'm going to skip this just because of the definition just of the sector, but I wanted to show you with an animation what is this based on. Basically, what we do is we do area sampling. And so we take a city, we divide it by grids, and then in the grids, we put all the businesses, and then we select blocks within these businesses. These blocks usually have 150 meters by 150 meters. We go and send enumerators to the selected blocks to enumerate all the businesses, and you can see that the yellow points here. And then the idea is that we set a threshold, and then basically these are if you see, these are the numbers of, let's imagine that this will be the numbers of businesses enumerated in these blocks. And then we set a threshold and say, oh, if they say the threshold is going to be 10, if there is the threshold of 10, they said any block that has more 10 or more, we need to enumerate all the blocks that are adjacent to that. And so this is basically what happens. We enumerate all and then we continue sequentially like this until we just don't have many more blocks to block. And this is a process that is called iterative. It's called ICS, adaptive cluster sampling. And by doing this, the important thing is that this has been in statistics, there's a way to assign a probability of selection for each one of these blocks. Within those blocks, we select randomly businesses and do an interview. And the interesting of this approach is that you get a probabilistic sample of the informal sector. And that is incredibly innovative, because most people who have interviewed in informal business, either they have a census, which is very rare around the world, or if they don't have a census, they just try to randomize the selection somehow. But they cannot really associate a probability of selection to the businesses. We did it for many years like that. With this new methodology that we are implementing around the world more and more, we can serve the informal sector to generate probabilistic samples. And for those of you familiar with statistics, the importance of this is that if you do a project example, you can make inferences from the data you have to the population, i.e. the universe of informal businesses in that geographical location. So you can make analysis not only for the sample, but actually for the whole population of informal businesses. So this is I just wanted to share this very briefly with you because it's something, a new area of work within the unit, and whoever join us, we will expect that he or she will be interested in this area and will learn about it. And let me just finish with this last point because I'm way over time, is the research. And so also I wanted to highlight that my team is composed mostly, I mean, as you saw my announcement, I put masters, but if you have a higher degree, in fact, a lot of my members, myself, I'm a PhD in economics. And so the reason why we have so many PhDs in economics is we also are very interested in research. So in here, I don't want to go to this, but I did put a few slides of several research that has been produced in the unit and from people abroad. This one, for example, these are the topics that we're working on research. We were talking about, peer review research. And in fact, let me just present this one case here that is done by one of my colleagues, one of my team members or colleagues. Mohammed Amin here, the main author, is a team member. And so one of the good things also for those of you who want to join is that one of the value added of the positive externalities of my unit being in the research team is not only that you participate in the data collection, learn all the technical things, but also have the possibility of learning and producing research with these some of them very well-established researchers that mostly focus on using the data in answering questions like, for example, what is the effect or the presence of informality on formal businesses? Does it help them? Does it compete with them? What is the effect? And so this paper here is a very interesting here. Let me just finish here because I wanted to show you the result that Ami has, for example, which I find extremely relevant for example, that one result very clear is that the labor productivity of informal in firms is about 1/4 of formal firms, and they coexist, which is a very interesting thing because most of them are basically in the main market. And then all the different results. But let me just stop here because I see that we only have about 10 minutes now. So I want to answer some of the questions that you may have and the questions that you may have posted on the online. Okay, Koichi.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for a super energetic presentation on what your unit does, and also not only a enterprise survey, but also a forthcoming business ready survey that you mentioned. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. We received some questions from the audience in advance, and then I shared those questions with you, Jorge, in advance. And then some of questions that you already sort of addressed during your presentation, but let me anyway read those questions and asking you to make a short responses. First one, this is a question from Kimura-san. Thank you very much for your question. I find the data and enterprise survey has been enriched year by year, not only the questions, but also data structure. How will you develop enterprise survey in the future? So you sort of mentioned about it, but if you would want to talk a little bit more about the future directions, please. Thank you.
Perfect. Koichi, thank you for the question. As I said, you're right. I already answered. Actually, we're expanding the coverage in the frequency of the service. It's going to be every 3 years, every country. And so that will be an immense, rich data set for research. I don't need to mention that. So we expect there's going to be a lot of research produced. And for us, those of you who join us, we ourselves are establishing alliances with researchers to actually make the most of this data. So we expect this data keeps on growing. And the importance of data, as people realize the externalities that emerge from the generation of the data, more and more are going to be recognition of this. And so I think this will continue for a few years. So there's a lot to be done. So I think because we imagine this, there were more than 800 papers published in 10 years at that measurement, when we were producing data for only developing economies. Imagine once we have data for all the rich, along with the pre-developed economies, the developed economies, the end, the sky is the ceiling, pretty much.
Thank you very much. In fact, Jorge, you may want to unshare the slide so that we see you in a bigger screen.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, let me see.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I forget. Yeah, thank you,
you.
Koichi. Go ahead.
Okay, the second question, a question from Federas Intouch. Thank you for your question. Did the survey consider the effects of international finance organizations on national economies? Were the 159 economies considered segregatedly or cluster-wise? So that was a question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The 159 economies was the economy that we covered before the business ready we started. I mean, up to very recently. That explains, those were developed mostly on demand. As I explained, it was mostly our colleagues in operations who actually demanded this service, and we were producing them for our police and operations at the demand of the countries. And so it was patchy. It was not like a sequence, a very well organized sequencing. The difference that I explained right now is that now we're implementing this service in a systematic way manner every 3 years. And so the division of which countries are in the first, second, and third round is not classed in. It was not based mostly on a decision that we needed to have in every wave countries of all the different regions, the different incomes of different levels of income, different levels of development, and also in the bank we made distinction between fragile countries, and so we needed to have in every year a few of those ones. So that was the division pretty much. That was it, because the idea is that all the countries will be covered every 3 years. I think that's the question there, right? There was a part that I don't know if I skipped something that I.
Yeah, I think you responded to the question. So let me read the next question. This is a question perhaps from the potential candidates. I wouldn't read the name. What would you emphasize the most when evaluating the candidate to make selection? While various skills and requirements have been mentioned in the TOR of the economist position currently being advertised, any advice for someone who is considering to apply for this position would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm going to be very honest on this, and thank you for the person who asked the question. I really like people that ask the question, directly. And so I want to tell you one thing that is very important. That, as I explained during the presentation, I wanted to give you all a sense of how technical things can become. You don't have to be that technical in the application, by the way, but you have to have an interest on the topic, on private sector and research, not only on the data generation, because that's what we do here. We don't do operations. And in order to do that, one of the things I do have to highlight, that I would highlight that it would be important, is the quantitative skills, that people must have. All my team works on Stata, to give an example, and they are intermediate to advanced users of Stata. And so you may not be familiar with Stata, which is the software the World Bank uses, but you may have just SPSS or any other software. We all in grad school use different softwares. The idea that you need to be familiar with the logic of programming in Stata or something, or at least have some knowledge. We do train the team not only on the statistics but also on the test, but there has to be an interest. And so I think that is one of the skills that will highlight the one most important. And of course, as you saw, it's an economist position, and so it's typically will be someone with an economics background, of course, because it's very econ driven what we do, even though it's data collection, but it's really most, and you saw a lot of statistics on the sampling and so forth, but really the issues that we deal and the topics, the answers, and the way we go about in research is a typically economist type of work. And most of my team, pretty much all of them are economists. So you will be joining a team of economists. And that is very, in itself, I think, very rewarding. I hope the candidate would be excited, because when you work with other economists, you kind of like learn and grow with them. That's the idea. And so, as I said, you don't have to be super knowledgeable on this, but again, another skill that would be helpful, it would be you have done some data collection. It would be some experience in data collection that would be also helpful. Okay.
Great, thank you. Next question is that question perhaps is also from the potential candidate, but not necessarily focusing on the economist position currently being advertised. So question is this: your team seems to be all economists. Is a knowledge on statistics and data analysis is a must? Is there any need for lawyers, for example?
Actually, not, to be very honest, I'm going to be very honest, not in my team. I cannot hire a lawyer because we don't do law. But in the parallel unit, the business ready is in my team, in my department, right? I'm a manager of one. Business Ready is a manager, another manager. She does have a lot of lawyers. She actually was with my team before, Valeria Perotti. You may know her. She's the manager of Business Ready. She's an economist herself, but she hires lawyers. And so in that department, there's an interest for lawyers. And then there's the other women business and the law, which is another position that's being advertised. That also, I think the lawyers are very eligible for that position. In the bank, it's not, I don't think you can apply for an economist if you're a lawyer. You have to have some sort of law economist background, because it's an economist position. But there's other in the same department here, the units, there's a lot of demand for lawyers. That's correct. So I don't discourage this, perhaps not for my position, but for other positions that are in the same program, because I know they need lawyers.
Great, thank you very much. Jorge, you responded to all the questions that we received in advance in very effective manner. Also, the question during the question that we received during the presentation. So thank you very much. But before wrapping up, any quick final words to finally pushing the potential candidates to really apply for your team?
I will ask you, please, I'm very open. It's a very, very enjoyable unit. I think the one that I would characterize, and I mean, as I said, I'm a PhD in economics myself, and I never thought I was going to end up doing this, because it's a unit that is a combination of data collection with research, and it's very close to clients. And so we go around the world and we do see the reality of private sector. It's a very rewarding position. It's exciting. And so that's the message I will convey. I want to attract people who are interested and who have the skills. And I think you will enjoy it. Whoever joins will enjoy being with us. I know, because my team, no one wants to leave me. They've been with me for many years, and they like what we do. And so, which is a good thing. So it's an enjoyable job, and as I said, don't get intimidated by if I were too technical. It's a learning process as well, joining a new unit. Okay.
Great, thank you very much. With us this morning from Washington online, Jorge Rodriguez Meza, who is the manager for the Enterprise Analysis Unit in DEC in the World Bank. Thank you very much, Jorge.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. And of course, perhaps the last thing, in the website, you can find my contact. If they need to, you can contact me if you have any questions. I may not be able to answer, but I will put you in touch with someone in my team who can actually provide answers if you have any other questions about the position or about what we do. But anyway, thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Before eventually closing up, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. First, Jorge mentioned the Women Business and Law team, and actually Women Business and Law team has also the economist position currently being advertised in the same program. Now, this time we are not going to organize the specific seminar featuring the report itself, but 3 months ago we organized a Women Business and Law 2024 editions featured in the World Bank Tokyo online morning seminar series. So if you check the archive on the channel on YouTube, you can still find the video of that seminar. So you may get a sense of what the Women Business and Law 2024 report and team. Actually, some of the team members are talking about the report itself. So please take advantage of that. And then also we have lots of other information sessions and career seminars in line with the Japanese national recruitment programs currently ongoing. So please take advantage of those opportunities. So with that, once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Jorge, for joining.
Thank you, and good day to all of you.
Great, thank you. See you next time.